A silent little girl was found crying alone in the rain, but the moment she saw the billionaire who walked into the station, she whispered one word that froze everyone around her: "Daddy." The rain had been falling since late afternoon, steady and relentless, turning the sidewalks into blurred reflections of streetlights and passing cars. It was the kind of rain that muted the world, softened footsteps, and made even the loudest parts of the city feel strangely distant. On the corner near a convenience store that had already closed for the night, a small girl sat huddled against the brick wall. She was 5 years old, though at first glance she looked smaller because of the way she was curled in on herself, as if trying to occupy the smallest possible space. Her blonde hair was tangled and wet, clinging to her cheeks in strands. Her blue eyes were swollen from crying. She had cried for so long that her body now shook in small, uneven tremors. The yellow dress she was wearing might once have looked bright and cheerful, but now it was dirty, wrinkled, and soaked through from the rain. People passed her, some glancing but most averting their eyes. No one expected to find a child alone at that hour, and when something feels wrong enough, many prefer not to see it. But eventually, someone did stop. A woman heading home from her late shift paused when she heard the uneven sobbing, a sound raw enough to feel like it was tearing itself out of a tiny chest. When she approached and asked the girl where her parents were, the child tried to answer, tried to form words, but only one came out between gasps: "Mom, Mom, Mom." Her voice collapsed into crying again, and the woman, with trembling hands and more worry than experience, called the police. When the officers arrived, they spoke to the girl with the practiced calm of people who had been trained for emergencies but still carried human gentleness in their tone. They wrapped her in a blanket from the car, carried her to the back seat, and drove her through the rain-filled streets to the station. The entire ride, she clung to the fabric of the blanket like it was the last piece of something safe in a world that had broken apart. They asked her name several times, softly, repeating it with patience until she was able to whisper it. Her name was Lily. She didn't say anything more after that. At the station, they brought her into a quiet room with warm lighting and a soft chair in the corner. They gave her hot cocoa, though she didn't drink it. She sat curled in the chair, knees pulled up, chin resting on her arms as if she believed that if she made herself small enough, she might disappear or wake up in a different place. Officers took turns trying to speak with her. Some tried to coax her gently, some tried to distract her with toys or stories, some simply sat near her in silence, hoping presence alone might make her feel less afraid. But Lily seemed unreachable, lost in a place inside herself where fear had taken root. It was only when one of the officers returned from the hospital with the report that the full picture began to take shape. Lily's mother had been found earlier that night in an alley several streets away, unconscious, unresponsive, in critical condition. She had been taken to the hospital, and now machines were keeping her alive. The officers tried discussing next steps, contacting relatives, searching for guardians, arranging emergency placement. But the forms remained blank. There were no names to write. There was no one to call. Lily sat in the corner, silent, small, and shaking. Outside, the sky remained heavy with rain. Inside, the sound of ringing phones and typing keyboards filled the station in a muted rhythm. Life moved on around her, but she remained still, as if frozen in the single moment where her world had slipped away. No one could reach her. No word, no gesture, no comforting tone made any difference. She did not speak. She did not look at anyone. She did not move. Until the door opened, and a man stepped inside. William Hargrave entered the station without any of the dramatic presence that tabloids like to assign to him. He moved in a way that was controlled, purposeful, yet understated, as though he had long ago learned how to take up space without demanding attention. He was there that evening for a scheduled meeting with the community outreach coordinator, part of the philanthropic programs his corporation funded. To someone who did not know him, he looked perfectly composed, dark, neatly styled hair, tailored suit that fit like it was made for him alone, blue eyes that were clear and focused. He rarely raised his voice, rarely showed visible emotion. Years of negotiations, boardrooms, and headlines had trained him to wear restraint like armor. He had no idea that tonight would split his life into before and after. The officer escorting him through the lobby began explaining something about paperwork delays and scheduling changes, but William's attention shifted before the explanation finished. His gaze caught on the small figure curled into the corner of the waiting area. A tiny girl wrapped in a blanket far too large for her, sitting perfectly still except for the faint tremor in her shoulders with every shallow breath she took. At first, he only noticed her in the way anyone would notice a child alone in a place meant for adults. But then she looked up. Her eyes met his. Wide, glassy blue eyes that looked strangely familiar, like the memory of a face reflected back at him across time. He didn't know why it unsettled him, only that something in him paused, something quiet and deep. The officer guiding him followed his gaze and sighed softly. "We found her tonight. Alone. No family listed anywhere. Mother's in the hospital. Critical condition." A hesitation, as if choosing words carefully. "The girl hasn't spoken to anyone except to say her mother's name once." William nodded out of courtesy, intending to move on, to continue with his meeting. But he didn't move. His feet remained firmly planted, his gaze fixed. There was something about the way the girl's small hand clutched the blanket like it was her anchor to the world. He approached slowly, the same way one approaches a frightened fawn, carefully, deliberately, making sure not to create any threat. Lily lifted her face more fully now, her chin trembling. Her lips parted as if she were trying to form words she had been swallowing for hours. Her eyes didn't blink. She looked at him as though she was trying to understand something impossible. He crouched down to be level with her, resting one hand loosely on his knee. He didn't speak first. He simply waited. Silence, when allowed to be patient, can be safer than words. Her hands unfurled slightly from the blanket. Her breath stuttered. And then she whispered it. "Daddy." The sound was so small he almost wasn't sure he heard it. A fragile thread of breath shaped into a word. Not a request, not a hopeful guess, something closer to recognition. William felt something cold and electric travel through him. He blinked, and in that blink, memory rose from somewhere he kept sealed away. A girl with sunlight hair, laughter that sounded like wind in the trees, eyes full of warmth that had once been his entire world. Anna. He hadn't spoken her name aloud in years. He had tried to search for her, had lost her anyway, and eventually had buried the grief because no one survives carrying heartbreak forever. But here, in front of him, was a child with her eyes. Not similar. Not reminiscent. The same. He spoke slowly, because he had forgotten how to speak to something this fragile. "What is your mother's name?" Lily's chin wobbled. She swallowed hard. "Anna," she breathed. "Anna Reeves." His heart didn't stop. It just changed rhythm. The world didn't fall apart. It just shifted. He sat down beside her fully now. The officer looked between them, sensing something he could not name. William's voice was low, steady, and so gentle it felt unlike anything he'd spoken in years. "Lily," he said, testing the name like something precious, "I knew your mother. A long time ago." Her eyes widened, and tears filled them again, but not like before. Not wild panic, something softer, a relief so great it hurt. "She didn't come back," Lily whispered. "I waited, and she didn't come back." William inhaled slowly, trying to hold his voice together. "She is in the hospital," he said. "She is alive." The officer stepped forward to confirm quietly, explaining the situation in more detail, how Anna had been found unconscious, how her condition was serious, how they were unsure how long she would remain unresponsive. Lily listened, absorbing every word, even the painful ones. Her tiny hands pressed against her eyes, pushing away tears that had nowhere to go. Her voice came out as a broken question, shaped by a fear she was much too young to carry. Will she wake up? William didn't lie. He also didn't allow despair to claim the moment. She needs someone with her, he said simply. Someone who won't leave. Lily looked at him as if the world was holding its breath. And you came, she said, almost inaudible. Yes, he answered. Because he suddenly knew. He would not leave this child. He would not leave Anna, again. And everything in his life before this moment had been preparation to make this decision without hesitation. William didn't remember the drive to the hospital clearly. He remembered the weight of the umbrella, the sound of the rain hitting the windshield, the faint glow of streetlights sliding across the window. He remembered Lily's hand, small and cold, resting on top of his. She didn't cling, she didn't squeeze. She simply placed her hand there, as if testing whether he was real enough to stay. He made sure not to move away. She stared out the window with a stillness that did not belong to a 5-year-old. It was the kind of quiet one learns only after losing too much too soon. The hospital was quiet when they arrived. The halls smelled of antiseptic and warm air running through vents. Lily's steps were slow and uncertain, each one careful, as though she feared the ground might give way beneath her. William stayed beside her, not leading or pushing, but matching her pace. They approached the nurse's station, and when William said Anna's name, the nurse's expression shifted slightly, something like recognition mixed with sympathy. She guided them to a room at the end of the hall, one separated from others, where the lights were dimmed and the sound of machines filled the silence with a steady rhythm of beeps and breaths. Anna lay still in the hospital bed. Her skin was pale, almost translucent under the soft lighting, her hair spread out across the pillow in a loose halo. There were faint shadows under her eyes, the kind that hinted at exhaustion long before the collapse. Her chest rose and fell with the rhythm of the ventilator. She looked fragile in a way William had never imagined her to be. The last time he saw her, she had been laughing at something he said, sunlight catching strands of her hair. She had looked alive. Limitless. Impossible to lose. Now she looked like a memory he was terrified to touch. Lily approached first. There was no hesitation, no fear. She climbed gently onto the side of the bed and lay beside her mother, her small arm draped carefully across Anna's waist. It was not dramatic, it was instinct. The movement was so natural that William felt something collapse inside his chest as he watched. Lily pressed her face into the blanket and whispered something no one else could hear. The quiet in the room grew deeper, more fragile, as though even sound feared to disturb the moment. William remained at the foot of the bed, unable to sit, unable to step closer. His hands were clasped tightly behind him to keep them from shaking. He did not know whether he had the right to be there. He had loved Anna once with the kind of certainty that shapes the course of a life, but love alone had not been enough to keep their worlds tied together. She left. Or maybe he drove her away. Time had blurred the details into something that hurt no matter how he examined it. A doctor entered the room quietly, a clipboard in hand. He explained Anna's state in a calm, clinical voice. There was brain activity, which was hopeful. Her concussion had caused swelling, and she was in a controlled coma to allow healing. Her chances were uncertain but real. She needed rest, stability, presence. People recover more often when they are not alone. Lily didn't look up during the explanation. She stayed pressed against her mother's side as if keeping her there by force of will. When the doctor stepped out, Lily finally spoke, her voice so small it almost disappeared into the sheets. "Mom never told me his name," she said. "But she said, if anything ever happened to her." I should find someone named William. I didn't know how. I thought maybe he wasn't real. William knelt beside the bed then. His movements were slow, careful, as if any sound might disturb the air around Anna. He rested his hand near Lily's, not touching, only close enough for her to know he was there. I tried to find her, he said, and his voice did not tremble though his breath did. I looked for her for a long time. I didn't stop thinking about her. Not once. Lily raised her eyes to him. They were Anna's eyes. Deep blue, vulnerable, seeing more than a child should. "Are you my dad?" she asked. The question was not desperate. It was simply a truth-seeking shape. William did not answer immediately. Not because he didn't want to. But because he wanted to say it correctly, carefully, in a way that would not break her. "I don't know yet," he said softly. "But I know this, I knew your mother. I cared for her deeply. And I will not leave you. Not now. Not ever." Lily watched him, searching his face for something she needed to believe in. Slowly, she nodded and turned back toward her mother, resting her head again against Anna's arm. For the first time since she was found, her breathing slowed into something closer to sleep. William remained beside them, not touching either of them, not moving, not speaking. He stayed because there was nowhere else in the world he could be. Because every part of his life, every success and failure, every wound he had silenced, had led him to this quiet room. Because the past had returned not to punish him, but to ask him who he was now. And because sometimes, love does not arrive with grand gestures. Sometimes, it simply stays. He stayed at the hospital through the night, though no one had asked him to. The nurses had offered polite instructions to go home and rest, but he didn't move. He sat in the chair beside the bed, jacket off, sleeves rolled to his elbows, his posture rigid as if relaxing might make the moment too real. The quiet hum of machinery was steady, broken only by the occasional soft voice of a nurse checking the monitors. Lily slept curled carefully beside Anna, her hand resting on her mother's arm as though afraid any gap would let her drift away completely. William watched them with a heaviness he could not place into words. He had spent years controlling outcomes, markets, corporations, negotiations, entire sectors of economic movement, but none of those skills mattered in this room. Here, healing was not something money could command. Here, time and hope were the only currencies, and both felt unbearably fragile. When morning arrived, sunlight filtered through the blinds in muted, pale strips. Lily stirred, her eyelashes fluttering before her eyes opened fully. The first thing she did was look at her mother. Only after confirming she was still there did she look at William. There was no dramatic relief in her expression, no sudden smile. She simply studied him, as if trying to understand the shape of this new reality. He stood and offered her a quiet greeting. She didn't speak, but she nodded in acknowledgement. A nurse brought breakfast for Lily, plain oatmeal and a small carton of milk. Lily ate slowly, mechanically, without expression. William ordered food for himself but barely touched it. After breakfast, a social worker entered the room. She spoke kindly but with firm procedure, explaining that Lily's living situation needed to be addressed, at least temporarily. Lily could not remain at the hospital indefinitely. She would need somewhere safe to stay, and someone to take responsibility. When the social worker suggested an emergency foster placement, Lily's hand tightened around her mother's blanket. Her breathing picked up, her eyes widening, her body stiffening with the beginning of panic. Her voice broke in one short plea. No, William didn't speak at first. He simply looked at Lily, then at Anna, then back to the social worker. It would have been easy to say no in a way that was emotional and unstructured, but that would not help her. He needed to speak in a language that the system would understand. "I'll take temporary guardianship," he said, his voice calm, professional, unshakable. The social worker blinked in surprise. She recognized his name almost instantly. Since he was not listed on any records as connected to the child or her mother, the request carried complexity. Paperwork. Court verification. Background checks. Processes that could take days or longer. But William did not back down. He stated, clearly and without hesitation, that he would begin all procedures immediately and that Lily would not be removed from the hospital until arrangements were confirmed. His voice was free of volatility, but there was no mistaking the finality in it. After a quiet moment, the social worker nodded, agreeing to file the request urgently. Lily watched him carefully, her small hands clutching the blanket. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. But something in her posture changed, just slightly. Her shoulders no longer pulled so tightly inward. Her breathing slowed. The next several hours became a restless cycle of meetings and signatures and instructions. Lawyers were contacted, documents prepared, emergency approvals requested. William moved between phone calls and the hospital room, always returning to sit beside Lily again. Each time he returned, she looked up to confirm he was still there. Each time he was. In the afternoon, Lily fell asleep again, exhausted by fear and the slow bleed of emotional strain. William stepped into the hallway, leaning against the wall, closing his eyes. For a long moment, the years peeled away. He remembered Anna sitting beside him in the early mornings when they were young, her laughter soft and effortless, her head resting on his shoulder. He remembered how deeply he had loved her, how sure he had been that their future was already written. And he remembered the moment he lost her, how words spoken in anger and misunderstanding had broken something delicate between them. He had searched for her afterward, but by the time he found where she had gone, she was already gone again. He exhaled slowly, pressing his hand against his forehead. Regret does not fade with time. It only changes shape. A soft sound pulled him from his thoughts. Lily was awake again, standing quietly in the doorway. He straightened, meeting her gaze. She didn't say anything, but she didn't need to. She walked toward him and, after a brief moment of hesitation, reached her small hand toward his. This time, she held it. Not lightly. Not unsure. Fully. He knelt so they were at the same height. "I'm not leaving," he said. The promise was quiet, but unbreakable. Lily nodded, her voice finally emerging again, thin and trembling but real. "Okay." It was the first moment trust took root. Small. Fragile. But alive. The following afternoon brought the formalities. A guardian ad litem was assigned, emergency paperwork pushed through, and signatures exchanged under the quiet hum of printer machines and legal language. It was the kind of administrative chaos that usually required weeks, but when someone with William's influence requested urgency, the system seemed to find room to move faster. Still, nothing about the process felt triumphant. It was not a victory. It was simply necessary, like stabilizing something that had been left teetering too long at the edge. When all the forms were complete, Lily walked beside him through the hospital corridor, her hand gripping his with more certainty than the previous day. She didn't ask questions, though confusion still clouded her expression. Her world had shifted twice in 2 days, and children do not adjust quickly to the ground changing under their feet. William didn't speak either. He didn't try to fill silence with reassurances. He understood that sometimes the quiet was where trust formed. His car, a sleek, dark sedan, waited outside. The city air was damp but no longer raining, the pavement glistening under a muted sky. Lily looked at the car with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. William opened the door for her and helped her climb into the back seat. She sat upright, hands folded neatly in her lap, like someone afraid to disturb anything in front of her. The drive to his home took nearly 30 minutes. They passed stretches of tree-lined streets, modern glass buildings, and neighborhoods that looked carefully planned and well-maintained. Lily watched everything with wide, quiet eyes, though her body remained still, as if bracing for something she couldn't name. William sat beside her rather than in the front passenger seat, watching the city blur past the window while occasionally glancing toward her to ensure she was okay. His home appeared behind an iron gate and a long driveway. It was a modern estate, designed with clean lines and warm wood accents rather than flashy opulence. It was beautiful, yes, but its beauty was controlled and precise, like a life arranged to avoid surprise. As the car rolled to a stop, Lily hesitated before stepping out. She stared up at the tall windows and expansive entryway, her small frame looking even smaller against the scale. She did not look impressed. She looked overwhelmed. Inside, the house was quiet, filled with soft light and subtle scent of cedar. A housekeeper greeted them, but William raised a hand gently before she could step closer. Not because he didn't want help, but because Lily was already shrinking into herself, fingers tense at her sides. "No introductions right now," he said softly. "Give her time." The housekeeper nodded and withdrew. William led Lily to a room near the back of the house, one with soft cream walls, pale curtains, and a window that looked out onto a garden filled with evergreen shrubs and early spring buds. The bed was neatly made. Stuffed animals sat arranged in a chair, untouched and clearly new. This room had not existed like this 2 days ago. Someone had put it together that morning, quietly, quickly, without needing to be asked. Lily stepped inside and stood still. She didn't move toward the bed or the toys. Her eyes moved across the room, cautious, uncertain, as though waiting to learn what she was supposed to do. "This is your room," William said. His voice was gentle, but not overly so. He spoke to her like someone capable of understanding, not like something fragile. "You don't have to sleep here tonight if you don't want to. You can stay near me. But this space is yours now. No one else's." Lily looked up at him. "Is this, forever?" she asked. He swallowed carefully before answering. "For as long as you need," he said. "And longer, if you want." She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She simply nodded, absorbing his words the way one absorbs warmth after being cold too long, slowly, suspiciously, with a small flicker of something close to hope. William left her to explore, stepping out but leaving the door open. He walked into the living room and sat down, pressing his palms together. The house felt different already, no longer a curated statement of order and silence. Now there was something living in it. Something unfinished and unpredictable. He thought of Anna again. The way she used to talk about futures as if they were landscapes she could see just ahead, waiting to be walked into. She had loved with a kind of boldness he had not been able to match then. He wondered if she would want Lily here. And the answer came instantly, without hesitation. Yes. If she could not be here to protect her daughter, she would want someone who could. Someone who loved her. Someone who remembered who she had been. Footsteps approached, small, careful steps. Lily appeared in the doorway, holding one of the stuffed animals. She didn't speak, but she walked over to him and sat beside him on the couch. Not touching him. Not leaning into him. Just beside him. It was not affection, exactly. It was something deeper. The beginning of belonging. The next days settled into a fragile rhythm, one built out of uncertainty and careful steps. Every morning, William drove Lily to the hospital, then brought her back home each evening. She carried her stuffed animal with her always, a small white rabbit whose ears were already beginning to show the software of being held too tightly. She would sit beside her mother's bed and speak in whispers, though sometimes she didn't speak at all. Sometimes she simply placed her hand on Anna's arm and watched the slow, rhythmic rise and fall of her breathing, as if memorizing it so she wouldn't forget the sound of being alive. William stayed in the room as much as she needed. Some days that meant sitting in silence for 3 hours. Some days it meant reading aloud from a children's book, his voice steady even on the pages that carried joy Lily didn't yet know how to receive. The doctors gave updates, some hopeful, some uncertain, but always measured, careful not to promise what they could not guarantee. Healing takes time, they said. The brain needs rest, they said. Love helps more than anything, though none of them said it directly. At home, the silence between William and Lily was different than the silence of fear. It was quieter, warmer, like walking through a house where someone is in the next room, not gone, just unseen. Lily followed him from room to room at a small distance. She didn't cling. She didn't ask for attention. She simply existed in his space, learning him the way a child learns a new alphabet. William slowed himself without consciously deciding to. If he was working, he kept the door open. If he made coffee, he made hot chocolate too. If he walked to the garden, he walked slowly, so her smaller steps could keep up. One afternoon, a neighbor's child came to deliver a package on behalf of his mother. He seemed about 10, confident and chatty, and he walked straight into the garden where William and Lily were sitting. The boy greeted Lily casually, asking if she wanted to play. Lily shrank back instantly, her hands curling into her sleeves. The boy looked confused, children often do when they mistake silence for rudeness, but William placed a gentle hand on the back of Lily's chair. "She's not ready today," he said simply. The boy nodded, not understanding but accepting, and left without pushing. When the garden was quiet again, Lily whispered, "I don't know how to talk to kids." She said it like a confession, like she believed she had done something wrong. William considered his answer. He knew how to talk to board members and investors, to politicians and CEOs. But a 5-year-old child's fear required a different language. He spoke slowly, not forcing anything. "You don't have to know yet," he said. "You've had to learn too many difficult things already. Talking to someone your age will come later. When you feel safe." She looked up at him, her chin slightly trembling. "Safe?" she repeated, as if testing the word. "Yes," he said. "Safe." She didn't respond, but she leaned her shoulder very slightly against his arm. Not a hug. Not even contact. Just a weight, a presence. In the evenings, William sometimes sat alone in his study after Lily fell asleep, though he didn't close the door. He found himself looking at old photographs he hadn't touched in years. Photos of him and Anna in their early 20s, her smiling with wild openness, him smiling in a way that looked unguarded, uncalculated, purely alive. They had been young, bold, certain that love alone could carry the weight of everything. But life had needs, pressures, expectations, and dreams that did not always align. He had chosen ambition once. She had chosen freedom. And in the space between those choices, they had lost one another. He traced the edge of one photo with his thumb, the image of Anna holding a paper cup of coffee, laughing at something just out of frame. Lily had that laugh in her eyes, even if she didn't remember how to use it yet. One night, as rain began again outside the window, Lily appeared in the doorway of the study, rubbing her eyes with the back of her hand. Her voice was barely audible. "I had a dream she disappeared," she whispered. William set the photograph down and opened his arms without speaking. Lily hesitated only a second before walking forward and climbing onto his lap. She sat curled into his chest, holding her stuffed rabbit tightly, her small body shaking with silent sobs. He didn't shush her or tell her not to cry. He simply held her, one hand resting gently on her back, steady and quiet. "She is still here," he said when her breathing began to settle again. "She is not gone. And I will be here with you every day until she wakes up." You are not alone anymore. Lily didn't respond, but her arms tightened around him, not with fear this time, but with something beginning to heal. Not fully. Not suddenly. But beginning. The day everything shifted came quietly, without warning or ceremony. It began like every other morning since Lily had come to live with William. He helped her tie her shoes, waited while she selected the same stuffed rabbit to bring, and they drove to the hospital through the gray light of early dawn. Lily walked the familiar hallway with the same careful steps, holding his hand loosely, not tightly but with certainty. She pushed the door to her mother's room open and climbed onto the chair beside the bed just as she always did. But something was different. It was almost imperceptible at first. The air felt less still. The rhythm of the machines seemed less mechanical. The color in Anna's face looked warmer, like a faint blush returning from somewhere far away. Lily didn't notice it immediately because children who have learned to hope cautiously do not look for miracles in every breath. She sat where she always sat, laid her head gently on her mother's arm, and whispered her usual greeting. "Hi, Mommy. I'm here." William stood near the window, reading emails he wasn't truly absorbing, his attention always half on Lily. But then Lily froze. Her body went still in that unmistakable way that precedes fear or awe. William looked up immediately. "Her hand," Lily whispered. "It moved." He stepped forward swiftly but without panic. He focused on the details: breathing rate steady, heart monitor normal, intravenous line secure. He had learned not to let emotion outrun evidence. But then he saw it. A faint twitch. Not random or involuntary. A movement that seemed to respond to contact, as if the body was trying to return to itself. Lily took her mother's hand in both of hers and whispered again, more urgently, her tears rising with hope too fragile to hold. "Mommy. I'm here. I'm here, please wake up." The doctor was called, nurses gathered, the room shifted into an almost reverent quiet. Tests were run. Responses checked. Lily remained at her mother's side, her small hands never leaving Anna's. William stood behind her, one hand on Lily's shoulder, steadying her without speaking. Minutes passed, then longer. And then Anna's eyelids fluttered. The world stopped. Slowly, painfully slowly, her eyes opened. They were unfocused at first, moving without direction. The doctor spoke calmly, guiding her, encouraging her to follow the sound of his voice. Her gaze drifted, and then found Lily. Recognition broke through sleep. Lily didn't breathe. She didn't blink. She just stared as if the entire world balanced on the next breath. "Lily," Anna whispered, her voice cracked and weak but real. Lily's sob came so suddenly it was almost a gasp. She collapsed forward, clutching her mother as if she might disappear again. Nurses carefully ensured the medical tubes weren't pulled, but none of them stepped closer. They understood. Some moments are sacred. William turned away for a moment, his hand covering his face, not to hide grief but to contain relief that was so powerful it felt like pain. He had imagined this moment in 1,000 variations, but none of them had prepared him for its reality. He wiped his eyes once, slowly, before turning back. Anna's gaze shifted again, past Lily, to the man standing at the foot of her bed. She stared at him as though seeing a ghost. Her lips parted, no words at first, just shock and something deeper, something old and unspoken. "William," she said. He stepped closer, not with dominance or certainty, but with caution and reverence. He placed one hand on the railing of the hospital bed and searched her face. "I found her," he said quietly. "And I'm here now." Anna closed her eyes for a moment, overwhelmed not by confusion, but by the weight of everything that had been lost and everything that was somehow still possible. When she opened them again, tears gathered at the corners of her lashes. "I tried to tell her about you," she whispered. "I didn't know how to find you. I didn't know if you wanted to be found." William shook his head slowly, an ache rising behind his ribs. "I never stopped," he said. "I never stopped looking. I never stopped wanting to know." Silence settled over the room, soft, full, heavy with years of separation collapsing into a single shared breath. Lily looked between them, her eyes wide with a child's instinctive understanding. She didn't need explanations. She didn't need history. She only needed what was now true. Her mother was awake. And William had not left. Lily took William's hand in her right hand and her mother's hand in her left, linking them together without speaking, as if she had always known that one day she would be the bridge between two halves of a story interrupted but not ended. The doctor cleared his throat quietly, reminding them of recovery steps, medical evaluations, time needed for strength to return. But the words moved in and out of the room like distant echoes. Nothing was urgent now except the fragile miracle unfolding before them. Anna was alive. Lily was no longer alone. William, for the first time in years, was exactly where he was meant to be. And the world felt as though it had stopped falling apart and instead begun, slowly, steadily, to knit itself back together. The weeks that followed were not smooth or easy, but they were alive, and that made every difficult moment feel meaningful rather than hopeless. Anna remained in the hospital for rehabilitation, her muscles weak and her coordination fragile, but her mind was clear and her eyes were steady. Lily visited every day, and each day she seemed to stand a little taller, speak a little louder, breathe a little easier. The fear that had clung to her like a second skin began to loosen its grip. She laughed for the first time in the hospital garden one afternoon, a small, startled laugh that seemed to surprise her as much as it surprised William. He had been pushing her on a swing, slowly, cautiously, as if she were made of glass, and when the wind caught her hair and the sun hit her face, something inside her cracked open and let light through. That moment meant more than any court approval or medical report. Anna's recovery progressed steadily, though it required patience, physical therapy, and strength she was only beginning to rebuild. She and William talked in quiet fragments, about the years they had lost, the choices they had made, the pain that had followed both of them. There were no accusations, only gentle truths spoken slowly, one at a time, like stones being placed back into the foundation of something that had shattered. Sometimes they were silent, simply sharing space, letting the presence of one another speak what words could not. Lily watched them carefully in those days, observing in the way children do, without speaking, without interrupting, simply absorbing every detail. She learned that silence did not always mean fear. Sometimes, silence meant peace. Sometimes, silence meant healing. She stopped sleeping curled into a protective ball and began sleeping stretched out, arms loose, the rabbit beside her instead of clutched against her chest. She began eating more, speaking more, even asking questions, curious, tentative questions about the world, about school, about the garden, about her mother's favorite songs. And when William answered, he did so with a softness that surprised even him. The day Anna was discharged, spring had arrived fully. Flowers bloomed in the hospital courtyard, and warm air drifted through the open car windows. William drove, Anna in the passenger seat, Lily in the back with her rabbit and a drawing she had made of the three of them standing under a bright yellow sun. The picture was messy and uneven, but the happiness in it was unmistakable. When they pulled into the long driveway of William's home, Anna sat still for a moment, taking in the sight. She had never imagined living somewhere like this. When she looked at him, it was not with awe of wealth, but with a quiet question, one about belonging. William reached for her hand, not asking, not assuming, simply offering. She took it, answering without words. Inside, Lily ran ahead and led Anna through the rooms she already knew by heart, the kitchen where William made her hot chocolate each morning, the garden where the swing was, the study where she sometimes sat on the floor with crayons while he worked. She showed her mother her bedroom last. Anna paused in the doorway, her hand pressed to her lips as emotion filled her eyes. The room was full of soft colors and gentle light, a space created not just for safety but for joy. Lily stood beside her, suddenly shy. "Do you like it?" she asked. Anna knelt carefully and pulled Lily into her arms, holding her so tightly that Lily's rabbit squished between them. "It's beautiful," she whispered, but her eyes were on Lily, not the room. That night, the three of them ate dinner together at the long dining table, though they sat close together at one end rather than spread apart. They talked, not about the past, not about what had been lost, but about what they were learning to build. Lily asked if they could plant flowers in the garden. Anna said yes. William promised to help. It was a simple conversation, the kind that families have every day without realizing how sacred it is. When Lily fell asleep, Anna and William stepped outside into the quiet evening. The garden lights glowed softly, and the air carried the scent of blooming jasmine. They stood close, but not touching, each regarding the stars overhead as if they had not remembered to look at them for a very long time. "You saved her," Anna said finally, her voice quiet but full. William shook his head. "She saved me," he said. Anna turned toward him then, and in her eyes was the echo of the girl he once knew, and the strength of the woman she had become. There was no rush, no certainty of what the future held, no dramatic promises. But there was something stronger, the steady truth that the story was not over. Not broken. Not lost. Repaired. Slowly. Deliberately. Together. Inside the house, Lily slept peacefully for the first time in a very long time, the rabbit tucked beside her, her breathing even and untroubled. And in the quiet of the garden, two people who had once lost each other understood, without speaking it aloud, that love had found them again, not in the way it once was, but in a way that was strong enough now to last.